Welcome to another Thought for the Day from Avon Valley Churches. My name is Sheilah. I worship at Hyde Church in the New Forest, one of the 7 churches in the benefice centred round Fordingbridge. Today I'd like to talk about dogs in biblical times and some particular aspects of the usefulness of modern dogs. Dogs generally have a bad press in the Bible, particularly in the Old Testament. Although they have been domesticated for at least 10 to 12,000 years, there is little mention in the Bible of domesticated dogs. There were packs of wild dogs roaming the countryside, acting as scavengers, mostly living off scraps in rubbish dumps outside the city walls. We're told that Jezebel was eaten by dogs in 2 Kings chapter 9. They were savage, and consequently the Israelites used them as a term of abuse for their enemies. In Psalm 22, David compares his enemies to a pack of dogs, saying, "Dogs have surrounded me, a band of evil men has encircled me." This is in contrast to surrounding countries, particularly Egypt, where dogs were used for hunting and guarding, as well as pets, dogs of the rich having their own graves. However, there is some indication that dogs were kept for guarding or herding sheep. Job describes his friends saying, "But now they mock me, men younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to put with my sheepdogs." Later in Israel's history, there is some suggestion that they may have been house dogs. In the book of Tobit in the Apocrypha, written in the 2nd century BCE, we hear the story of Tobit's son Tobias setting off on a long journey with his dog. The dog has a small part and is only mentioned twice. Once when he comes out of the house to follow to Tobias, and then is still with him when he returns, clearly a faithful pet. More about that story next month. It is considered one of the best examples of ancient Semitic short stories. When we come to the New Testament, there isn't much about dogs either. But we can learn a bit from the account of Jesus healing the Gentile Syrophoenician woman's daughter. William will read it now from Mark's Gospel.
Jesus left that place and went to the vicinity of Tyre. He entered a house and did not want anyone to know it, yet he could not keep his presence secret. In fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syrian Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. "First let the children eat all they want," he told her, "for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs." "Lord," she replied, "even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs." Then he told her, "For such a reply you may go. The demon has left your daughter." She went home and found her child lying on the bed and the demon gone.
Jesus is saying that his mission is first of all to the Jews, not to dogs, a word in use for non-Jews. That would come later. This seems harsh, but is softened by the word which is literally little dogs or puppies. These dogs are not the wild dogs or scavengers, but more of a household pet. The woman, quick as a flash, had a reply which pleased Jesus. The dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. So he commends her and heals her daughter. There's another story mentioning dogs that Jesus told. In the parable of the rich man and Lazarus in Luke's Gospel, chapter 16, Lazarus is described as a beggar sitting at the rich man's door, and even the dogs came and licked his sores. Traditionally, this has been seen as the act of scavengers and a picture of abject misery. However, in the 1st century, in the cult of Asclepius, the Greek god of medicine, dogs were seen as healers. Dr. Luke would have known of this, so perhaps the dogs can be seen as being kind to Lazarus, in contrast to the rich man who couldn't care less. Turning to today, apart from their role as wonderful companions, there are ever-expanding fields where dogs are so useful to us. Training guide dogs for the blind started in the UK in 1934. My friend Lynn, who I have spoken of before, is visually impaired and has guide dogs. Her last one, Dinah, who when she retired, aged 12, had a new career becoming certified as a Pets in Therapy dog, or Pets as Therapy dog. She worked in the children's ward, putting children at ease, also visiting children in the hospice. She was then asked to help a teenage boy who really needed regular blood taken to monitor his long-term medication. But he was severely needle phobic, and they hadn't been able to test his blood for 3 years. He was so scared that his mum often couldn't persuade him to get out of the car when they arrived at the hospital. On the occasion she did manage to come in, he then often couldn't even enter the clinical room. He met Dinah, and this helped him come into the hospital. Dinah and Lynn would wait for him outside the clinical room, and when he arrived, Dinah would run to him. Lynn would drop the lead and go into the clinical room ahead, and Dinah would follow with the young man holding her lead. And this got him through the door with more ease. He became extremely anxious and distressed in one early session, simply with the tourniquet being applied. He had a full panic attack, cried and shouted loudly and headed for the door. Dinah got up and followed him, fussed him and wagged, so intuitive. He bent down to fuss her. He told the social worker after that he would have left the room if it hadn't been for Dinah coming to him. He did eventually have his blood tests, but it took many months of step-by-step care. Search and rescue dogs started in the 17th century with the St. Bernard dogs in the Alps. But more recently, the Red Cross trained dogs to search for the injured in World War I, and this continued in World War II in the Blitz. Dogs are so successful because they have between 100 and 300 million scent receptors in their noses, compared to 6 million in humans. And the area in the brain to do with processing the information is 40 times larger than ours. More recently, dogs have been trained to detect various types of cancer. They can also monitor blood sugar levels and are used as medical assistance dogs for people with difficult to control type 1 diabetes. The latest training is to detect COVID. This would be very useful as a quick screen of travellers arriving at airports. And here is a short video about it.
Talking about dogs, we know they have a sense of smell so strong that they could even perhaps detect illness in people such as cancer. could they sniff out coronavirus?
A new government-backed trial intends to try and find out just that by seeing if dogs can be trained to detect COVID-19 in humans.
Let's find out more about this. We can talk to Professor James Logan, who's from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and to Dr. Claire Guest from the charity Medical Detection Dogs. Good morning to you both. Can we first find out who is the dog who is stealing the show this morning, and what can he or she do?
Well, this is Asher, and he may look like a fluffy bundle of fur, and actually he's half asleep now. But he is the best biosensor on the planet. His nose has got 350 million sensory receptors in it, and he can detect odours down to parts per trillion. So this is a really, really serious project.
So what has Dr. Claire Guest, what has he sniffed out then before?
Well, actually, Ash is one of our older hands, and he's already learned to sniff out malaria and Parkinson's disease. But we've got a team of young dogs all ready and waiting to go. Now, what Ash is going to tell us is whether COVID-19 has an odour, so that we can get the young dogs working on it. And it's a very, very, very exciting time.
So, Professor Logan, very good morning to you. You don't have a dog with you, so your image isn't quite as engaging as Claire's, but got a piano. I see you've got a piano, and that's nice. So talk us through the science on this one. I mean, we know dogs have extraordinary powers of detecting things. Talk us through the science about what we need to check to see whether they can find COVID in a patient.
Yeah, so as Claire has just said, dogs have an incredibly powerful sense of smell, and that's what we're looking to use in this study to see if they can detect people who have COVID-19. So our previous work has shown that diseases such as malaria, for example, have a very distinctive odour associated with the infection, and we've demonstrated with dogs that they can detect malaria at very, very high accuracy. So what we know about other respiratory diseases and lots of other diseases, in fact, for hundreds of years, we've known that diseases create changes in our body odour. We think the same thing is happening with COVID-19, and that's what this study is about, is to determine whether our body odour changes when we have that infection. And if it does change, then we're very, very confident that these dogs would be able to detect, and we could have a new way of diagnosing people with COVID-19.
So, Professor, just talk us through the actual practicalities of this testing. So, how does it work? You have a patient who you know to have coronavirus, who's tested positive, and then just can you talk me through the practicalities of how you go about the test?
Yeah, it's actually fairly simple. So we'll be recruiting people within NHS hospitals. We'll actually be recruiting NHS staff. And we won't know their status at the time of recruitment, but they will be tested. So they'll be tested as part of their routine job now. We'll ask those participants to wear a face mask for a couple of hours, and also some nylon socks. And nylon is an incredibly good matrix to collect body odour. We've used it for many years, and it's very good at collecting odour that we can retain. And this is how we did our malaria work as well. So those samples will then be processed, and they'll be sent to medical detection dogs. And this will be a blinded trial, so they won't know what the samples are, whether they're from an infected person or a confirmed uninfected person. And then through a process of training, they will see whether the dogs can actually learn the smell of somebody who is infected.
So, Dr. Guest, I mean, in practical terms as well, where would this be used? I mean, are we thinking airports, and how quickly can, how many people can a dog identify or go through, for want of a better phrase, if you're in an airport, say, and you're checking passengers who are arriving or leaving?
Well, we're all accustomed to seeing dogs in airports looking for drugs and explosives and agricultural produce in many countries. And these dogs are able to screen up to 250 people an hour. Now, they work in teams. The dog works for 20 minutes and then he has a rest and his doggy friend takes over. But the important thing is this is rapid, non-invasive screening, which can quickly define who in the population will need testing and isolation, and it could be a real game changer. And of course the dogs absolutely love it. As far as they're concerned, they're just doing what they're bred to do. They're searching and finding and getting a reward.
In Genesis chapter 1, after God created humans, he gave them dominion over all the animals. That's the word used in the King James translation. The NIV has rule over, whereas the Message has be responsible for. In Gary's reflections on the life of Prince Philip, he showed a clip from Beyond Belief, in which Prince Philip said, "God did not expect us to be masters of his creation. He expects us to be its guardians." This very much reflects the Message translation and is a reminder to me to be thankful for and care for all the wonders of God's creation. They are his gift to us to be cherished and used wisely, not abused and destroyed by our actions. I will close with a prayer by Anne Lewin. Creator God, we thank you for all the animals which share this planet with us. We thank you for our pets and all the creatures whose company we enjoy. Especially today, we thank you for the animals which help us and serve us in so many ways. May we always treat them with kindness and respect. Amen. Thank you for listening to this Thought for the Day. Please join us tomorrow when Andrea from Virginia will be sharing her thought for the day. Although the song we're about to hear now doesn't mention dogs, it does remind us to be thankful for all God's creation. Goodbye and God bless you.
Season till it is gathered.